Max, it's so good to see you again. It's nice to do
Obviously,
these conversations together as we get kind of going ready for our big event happening June 20th to the 23rd. Not everybody knows who you are or what Serenade does in terms of NFTs, the music scene. You're coming to us from the future, all the way from Australia. We have offices in London as well. And so for folks that don't have context, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you're doing for musicians.
yeah, lovely to be chatting with you again, Ian. So my name's Max. I run a music NFT company called Serenade. We're focused on creating practical solutions for the music industry to help improve fan engagement and derive new revenue streams for artists. We see Web3 technology as a wonderful opportunity to create new products, but what we talk about with artists, labels, publishers, and events are the types of products that we can create, not just the underlying tech.
And so when it comes to music NFTs, it's still emerging, obviously way further ahead today than it was at our last event in November. What's the pulse of music NFTs and superfan communities around music NFTs today? Where do you think we're at? What's the state of the union?
Well, I guess two parts to that question. What's the pulse? The pulse is hugely vital. People are extremely excited for what music NFTs will mean for the lives of artists. There are huge pain points that riddle the artist career cycle, the way that they can monetize their work. It's volatile and kind of vulnerable to all types of externalities. NFTs offer a really wonderful way to be creative, to generate new revenue streams direct from your fans, to forge a direct relationship with your fans, and therefore have a more guaranteed route to future revenues going forward. So it's hugely empowering for fans. For artists. The fan question is the body of work that people innovating in the music NFT space are still working on. So we know what the pain points are for artists, but how can we really unlock value for fans? And we think it's by kind of handing over really wonderful creative work. We think it's by using an NFT not as a collectible, but also as a ticket into a relationship. And we're still exploring the ways to forge that relationship between creator and fan base in a way that is valuable on both ends of the relationship.
What do you think about exclusivity around NFTs? There's the one-of-one approach, there's the unlimited approach, and everything in between. And of course, there's multiple drops that are done by an artist that's committed to it. So when you have a strategy conversation around like, hey, let's go this direction in terms of, its rariability, right? Or its openness as an engagement tool, how do you approach those strategically?
What's most important for many of the musical artists that I work with is being affordable and accessible to their kind of full audiences. It's not within the set of objectives of an artist just to find your wealthiest fan and monetize them. And so while one-of-one work is really appealing to super collectors, and there's definitely a conversation for kind of creating products around that breed of collector, what artists are increasingly turning to are larger edition sizes that, by fact of various qualities of that product, maintain a degree of rarity, exclusivity, something that is exciting in them, but are broader so that they can reach a wider pool of fans and start forging a kind of long-term relationship with that audience. Given the idea here is that we can migrate away from some other community-based relationships over kind of social media, and by learning who my top 100 fans are, I can develop a more sustainable career going forward.
What about analytics? There's analytics are changing, right? From Web 2 to Web 3. I mean, now we have people undoxed. You don't know who they are. Of course, it's different for a musician. But the whole process of knowing your fans, maybe has had times where it's been really hard to figure out. The labels have all the control. They know who the fans are. They have direct distribution. And then the web too, social media gave a lot of artists and fans a chance to be more connected. And the promise is that that can increase over time. What's the process of an artist, a musician, to understand their current community and be able to look at the data in terms of how is their community responding and how is it growing or things of that nature?
Yeah, so it is incredibly nascent, the tools that allow you to actually visualize, aggregate and communicate to the people that you have forged a commercial relationship with. So there are tools like Dopa out there that allow you to form a kind of analytical understanding of what your audience is up to, what they're liking, what they're not. The great thing is you can see your kind of ledger of transactions, so you can see where your products currently reside. Now, all the tools for actually getting in contact with that person are quite nascent, but it is really easy at the moment to just airdrop and provide a kind of a new surprise and delight type gift or giveaway to your audience. So there are ways inbuilt into kind of the sale of an NFT that allow for a reward. But what we're all working towards is a future where beyond just the kind of lovely reward every now and then, you can have more sophisticated ways of engaging that audience over time.
So, I was intrigued by what Kanye did with Donda too, in that he chose not to take $100 million option with Apple, but you got to buy his $200 speaker to get access to the music. And in many ways, I thought, well, that's an interesting model that kind of can emulate some of the things happening in the Web3 approach. So if you had a chance to talk with him about Donda 3 and he was willing to give you some time to kind of say, okay, why should I consider these more decentralized approaches around blockchain and Web3 and all the buzzwords that we use in the NFT industry? How might you chat with him about what's next? Not his past catalog of music, but what might he do for the next thing that would build upon his direct engagement with fans?
Yes, I loved and hated the STEM widget that Kanye came out with. I loved it because he proved the point that myself and other people in music NFTs are trying to prove, that if you forge a direct relationship with your audience, you can access a direct revenue stream that far surpasses the other revenue streams that are available to you. But the reason that I hated it was because a STEM player, whilst being quite a pretty little device, is a completely useless thing that you're not really going to use for anything else going forward. And the only reason you bought it was because it was the only way to access that music. So as a fan, you feel like you've been taken for a ride a little bit. But that said, if we were to be in discussion about Donda 3, me and Kanye just hanging out on a Saturday night, right, what I would say is that an NFT offers a clearer route to creating value for your fan, not just yourself. So you're able to give your fans something that has tradability, that can be kind of have various other kind of valuable perks, kind of utilities in Web3 talk, but various other perks built into it that unlock parts of your community or might unlock other merchandise or other live experiences. And if you as a fan don't want to kind of hold on to that anymore, you can sell it and you can kind of earn from that, and the artist can continue earning from that. So for your fans, it's empowering. For Kanye, it would allow him to benefit not just from the initial sale, but from every subsequent sale. And he would be able to continue reaching that audience after the sale. Because right now, those STEM players are most likely 95% of them on eBay trying to find the next kind of vibe, because all the fans have listened to the music, but Kanye won't know the identities of kind of the people who finally buy them.
That's a good point. So I think one of the things for a musician with such a huge super fan community like a Kanye is they have a catalog of existing records. And unfortunately, it's not done in partnership with one label. He doesn't own it outright. So it's very complex in terms of IP ownership and what can and can't be done. So if you got through the Donda 3 conversation, he says yes, he says insignificant. He says, okay, I got it. That's future. Well, what the hell do I do with everything I have? What are my options going back all the way to college dropout and through the last couple decades of what I've created?
So you don't have complete flexibility, frankly, to do anything that you want because the assets that you've created aren't yours. That's the challenging thing to reckon with, that these things that are really dear to you because they're your artistic products aren't necessarily in your possession. What you can do is you can have a conversation with your kind of label and with your publishers about those works, and where there's an alignment of a goal of trying to reissue this work or do something new with it, then you can come to the table around how you kind of facilitate a new kind of royalty split arrangement that allows for you to do new stuff with the work. The wonderful thing about music NFTs and this space broadly is the success of a release is really contingent on the personality of the original creator standing behind the project. And so even if a artist is no longer in control of the majority of the rights of their kind of master and publishing, because they need to stand behind the product for it to succeed, and labels and publishers acknowledge that, there is a more equitable playing field to have a discussion to negotiate those rights.
So what about like in context of Taylor Swift? From what I understand, Taylor and I aren't hanging out on a Saturday having a conversation, but I know, surprising. From what I understand, she's re-recording a lot of her old work. I don't know exactly how this all is going to work, but the premise I have is that she's not happy with the existing relationships. She's going to take her old content and basically redo it all over again, so she has either full or at least more ownership over it. So in context of that, if somebody says, well, hey, it doesn't matter what my existing relationships are, I have a new legal approach to kind of go through this process, does that ever come into the conversation in terms of an existing catalog of art that could be maybe recreated by the artist again?
So lots of artists do think creatively about how they can go into their back catalog to kind of find gems. But I think what I've noticed over the past 12 months of operating the business is that artists are more excited to create new things and to bring kind of fans into that relationship by kind of surprising them with new work. There are ways to avoid kind of going through a rights conversation for your master rights if you do re-record, and then you just have to leverage publishing, which is an easier conversation. But lots of, and that's why lots of artists are turning to doing live recordings, because it is a new master, which means they don't have to have that label conversation always. But artists are using NFTs not as a way to always just get strategic with what they've got, but as a way to better plan around what they're producing going forward.
And does this play into having conversations with artists that have passed? Like, if you had access to have a conversation with Prince's catalog or Michael Jackson's catalog, and there was, let's just assume, the full legal right to be able to do whatever they want around a community, but the artist is no longer alive. So the direct connection from a fan to the artist, that's not the same. And so how might those conversations be had? Maybe not today, but as we progress next year and over the next decade, as some of these existing portfolios of IP start to consider what can they do for the fan of the artist that's no longer with us, but they still want a greater engagement, at least with the art. How might those conversations be had now and in the near future?
So those conversations are being had today. But the difference between what's happening today and what's happening tomorrow is the product that is offered to fans. So today, the reason that a fan is opting into purchasing an NFT is because they feel like that NFT brings them a bit closer to the artist. And the conversation in the music industry around Web3 is, how do I maintain a level of authenticity in leveraging this technology to do new things? How do I do it in a way that isn't just perceived as being a cash grab? Now, that's really feasible with a live artist, because the artist gets to stand behind the project and speak to it. Now, in the future, as the actual products technology that underpins the music NFT landscape improves, then the artist will have more opportunity to step out of the process so that the work can speak for them. And this unlocks much greater opportunity for kind of artists who are no longer with us, because it can just be the product that speaks for itself. There have already been some experiments with catalog artists, and we're doing kind of a bunch of stuff there as well. I'm really excited for it in the future because as a collector of records, I collect records from the 50s to now, and unfortunately, I'm just not going to see a post from Johnny Cash on Twitter anytime soon, but I'd love to have something wonderful from him. And that's the type of thing that we would love to work on going forward.
Not everybody knows context for what Serenade is doing and intends to do moving forward. I understand you're in Australia, you have your office in London. Can you give more context for kind of where's the company at in terms of what you're providing to the market, and what do you hope to provide over the next 2 years, Greg? Because you've been around doing this for a couple of years already.
So today, what we produce are music NFTs that can look like audio, artwork, experiences, and artists can mint their own through the Polygon network at a low cost that we bear, and fans can collect them and store them in a collection on their website. That's what we've done today, and it works well, and it's allowed us to work with artists like Jungle, The Kooks, and Super Furry Animals, Ocean Alley, Confidence Man, and institutions like the Brit Awards. The direction that we're moving in is thinking of very practical ideas that artists and the music industry at large can adopt, which aren't necessarily new products, but are aligned with existing kind of behaviors and kind of things that are produced in the music industry, so that instead of being a fairly kind of idiosyncratic product, which is what NFTs are today in the music industry, they can be more part of the business as usual flow. And so those are the types of innovations that we're coming out over the coming months, things that kind of piggyback off existing behaviors and existing processes within the music industry, and therefore mean that the music NFTs that we produce will be more standardized within the music industry.
So how about competitors, collaborators? So I mentioned a couple. I mean, there's a lot of people that are saying they're doing music NFTs, but you take Royal's talked about quite a bit, and Mint Songs is another new one that's come up recently. And so when you look at these other organizations that maybe their marketing sounds the same, maybe their vision casting sounds the same, maybe it might do completely different things in completely different ways, but do you see these other music NFT, companies as competitors or as collaborators? Is it a mix of both? Is it truly a rising tide raises all ships? Like, give me some insight in terms of what your thought process is around other organizations doing similar things for artists and their communities.
So I truly believe that at this point in time where the industry is so nascent, it is a kind of rising tide raises all ships approach, because we're all learning how to educate an audience that is unfamiliar with this technology but loves kind of musical work. And so every win that Royal makes with a customer makes our job easier. Every win that we have with a certain product innovation will make Royal's life easier. And so I take a lot of inspiration from other platforms out there. My personal favorite is Sound XYZ. And I love that platform because I think the simplicity of offering to artists and fans makes it really kind of simple, understandable, and therefore practical within the artist's career and as a collectible for a fan. And so very much so there's innovation happening, particularly in the States, around different music NFT solutions. The wonderful thing about a new space is you can have many people kind of in the same broad landscape, but they occupy quite disparate niches, which allow everyone to operate simultaneously. And that's what we are seeing today. The kind of companies that you listed are all doing slightly different things. And that means that we can collaborate, learn, and it be quite a kind of still healthy competitive environment, because we're wanting to prove ourselves, but not competitive to the detriment of each other.
One of the things that is a focus is established musicians with already existing communities. So that way it's easier for them to transition with their existing community to leveraging NFTs. when you think about an established musician, is there a kind of minimal community size or minimal activity? Does it matter if they already have singles and records out, or is it good enough if they just built a massive community around TikTok or SoundCloud? Can you give some sort of like starting point, right? What's the floor for an emerging artist to kind of start this conversation with Serenade?
Well, here's the exciting thing is that there's really no floor in terms of audience size. There's a floor in terms of your readiness to engage with your audience and to really work hard to make this work. And I'll give an example. I always like to speak about Black Dave. He's a wonderful kind of US based musician who has under 50 monthly listens on Spotify, a similar amount on Apple Music, but sells out his music NFTs on all types of platforms and thinks really critically about how he wants to engage his audience, reward his audience. And because he's just so wonderful and articulate and deeply engaged in the subculture of music NFTs, people see him as a thought leader and within music NFTs. However, were I to want to speak to a very mainstream artist who doesn't want to put time into being on Twitter, doesn't want to put time into being on Discord, then it will be harder for that artist to really convince their audience that they genuinely want to participate in this space for reasons more than accessing a new revenue stream. And so that's where you need to be a huge artist to bring in just enough of your fan base to sell product, because lots of your audience won't be convinced that you're there to stay.
That's good. Well, as we wrap the conversation, it kind of reminds me, I'm reminded of Kickstarter. So 10 years ago, I was doing all these Kickstarter campaigns for clients and friends. And one of the things that became a drumbeat consistently is don't do a Kickstarter campaign thinking that the marketplace of Kickstarter is going to fund you. You do a Kickstarter campaign because the marketplace is simply a place where you bring your community to fund your idea. When it comes to musicians and you're having these conversations around tools and approaches and this marketplace and what can be done, do you say to them often like, hey, if you just get the content there, like there's already a community of, people that love music they're going to want? Or do you say, hey, honestly, you have to be aware that you don't just create NFTs, put in a marketplace, you need to invite your community because you have to bring your community to the marketplace. Is either of these more true than the other? Is there an existing community of people that are going to buy NFTs just because they're there? Or do the artists need to bring their community with them in order to make this successful?
Yeah, so we've undergone quite a year in exploring that dynamic. I think initially we very much wanted to create the infrastructure for an artist to communicate to their audience and bring them in without really us playing such a large role in that relationship. Then we recognize that while we need to give artists all the opportunity in the world to connect with their real audience through our technology, we have a responsibility in a very new technology space to create trust and kind of clarity with our buyers, because there are so many friction point hurdles in this space. And so we have a responsibility to not stand in the way of an artist, but an artist really does need to engage their community because it is that authentic tone of voice and kind of transparent communication line that makes a fan feel special and want to get involved in this space. We certainly do have a community of fans that are interested in what happens on Serenade. However, it is generally the audience of an artist that is migrated across to this new space through Serenade that really sees value.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing for people to keep in mind. Well, we really are looking forward to your talk, how to build a music NFT superfan community at NFT.NYC this year. So glad to have you join us again. And we celebrate the success that Serenade's had and certainly are fully behind you and, wanting to see more and more development happen with musicians and their communities. And of course, you and your team are a huge part of that. So thanks for all that you do for artists and their fans. And I look forward to seeing you in New York next month.
Thank you very much.